Arash joins us on the Western Pizza Guest Hotline. Arash, if we were to give this a hashtag and this were to live on Twitter, mine is simple. It's 2 words: purple tears.
Oh,
Minnesota
man.
Vikings. Happy New Year, by the way. Let's start with Happy New Year. Haven't chatted in a while. Always good to have you on. Coulson, uncalled for. That is not, if you're watching the stream, that is not nice. Who did that?
What has Coulson done now?
It's the crying Jordan face in the Minnesota Vikings helmet.
You know, everything is justified. I'm not even mad at it, Coulson. It is well-deserved. This is a franchise that you would only have to expect that this would happen to them in January. Of course they forgot to learn how to block and throw and tackle and run and do all the things that are required in, you know, the tackle football industry.
Were you surprised? Are you surprised, Arash, that it was? I was that it was that one-sided, and I think Maz had a good reference that it seemed like, and I know his O-line was banged up, but it seemed like Sam Darnold fell back into the old Sam Darnold that was with the Jets and the Carolina Panthers and his other stops. It just seemed like he fell back to that.
No, I'm just going to stop that. I think it's a lazy, easy narrative that's been going on the last 2 weeks. You know what it actually reminds me of is the foolishness around Henry Burris. Whenever Henry would throw a pick in November, it was like people were just waiting to jump down his throat. That Henry couldn't win a big game. And then I think he retired with, 3 Grey Cup rings, 2 as a starter. If you watch that game, that's not Sam Darnold's fault. It's not Sam Darnold's fault he didn't have a left tackle. It's not Sam Darnold's fault that the interior of the offensive line couldn't block anybody, that they couldn't establish the run, that in the first half, the Rams, I don't think anybody touched a ball carrier until at least 7 yards after they had crossed the line of scrimmage. Okay, Darnold held the ball a little too long a few times, yes. But that, the NCAA would have called that yesterday a lack of institutional control. That was an organizational failure from top to bottom. I get we live in a scapegoat world where we want to pin something on one person. That was everybody who didn't show up last night.
Yeah, it's just too bad that in the ultimate team game, usually it all gets lopped on the shoulders of the quarterback. Kevin O'Connell's comments after the game, I'm not sure if you saw it. It was very cryptic about, the time that they had together and then going forward. It didn't sound like I'm of the opinion. Now, maybe you agree or disagree. Did last night cost Sam Darnold a good chunk of money with whatever team he may sign with going forward?
Yeah, I would say the last night and the week before, don't forget, because it was a no-show in Detroit, too, the week before. These 2 weeks probably cost Darnold in the neighborhood of $50 million, at least. It would not have surprised me if the season had ended after week 16 or after game 16, and the Vikings are 14-2. It wouldn't have surprised me if 5 years, $150 million was waiting for Sam Darnold somewhere. Would the Raiders have paid him? Would the Saints have paid him? An organization like that. Shoot, could the Jets have maybe knocked on the door? Maybe even the Giants. There would have been landing spots. And I still think there will be. But I think the reason I listen to what KOC had to say, the reason why O'Connell is kind of cryptic is nobody really knows. Is Darnold... Could they slap the franchise tag on him? That's a very good possibility. The other is, guys, nobody knows what J.J. McCarthy is. Yeah, he was a top 10 pick. Great. What do we remember from J.J. McCarthy's last year at Michigan? That he handed the ball off really well to Blake Corum on their way to winning a national championship with their defense. So I just think that, knowing and what's going to happen next, it's just way too early, in the few hours after the offseason has started.
I had mentioned that nobody wants to play the Rams because they're house money, and when you have Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, who both won a Super Bowl, they know how to get it done when it matters most. Okay, let's start going through the divisional games this weekend. Rams and Eagles.
But I'll say one other thing about that.
Great against the Packers. Pardon?
Just one thing. Like that Rams defense also showed up last night. Like everyone's saying Darnold held on the ball too long and blah, blah, blah. Like 9 sacks, tying an all-time NFL playoff record. Like at some point, as they say in baseball, you tip your cap. You know, like that Rams defensive line is going to make things very difficult on Jalen Hurts this weekend in Philadelphia. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is, though, Jalen Hurts is one of those quarterbacks, too. He likes to hang on to the ball, or that split second of indecision where he doesn't know if he's going to take off or not. And we had talked, Derek and I, earlier about A.J. Brown shutting it down on his own and going to the sideline to read his book. So you've got Devonta Smith and then Saquon Barkley that you have to worry about. But once again, if you're cheering for the Rams or you got money on them against the Eagles, that's probably the team because, yeah, they beat Green Bay, but they didn't necessarily look good. And with Hurts coming back from that injury, you know what? It's going to take him some time to get up to speed. If the Eagles get one-dimensional, do you think that the Rams and their no-name defense can shut down Barkley?
Yeah, I have a hard time with the defense that has Jared Burson at calling him no-name. But I don't think the Eagles will or can be one-dimensional. Think about the names you just mentioned there. When you have A.J. Brown, when you have Devontae Smith, and look, Saquon can be so dynamic in the backfield too. I just think that you have to make a decision as a defense. How are you going to handle A.J. Brown? Can you really cover him man-to-man? I think the answer to that is no. And so I think what we're going to see this weekend out of the Eagles is that you're going to see a team that is going to use Saquon in a lot of ways they haven't shown on film yet. They're going to use him. They're going to use him out of the backfield. They're going to use him more in the passing game. They're going to really make him become as much of a passing receiving weapon as they are running the football as a weapon.
Arash, I got one more for you from the Eagles. Just wanted to get your take on these two things. I had a buddy actually that was at that game in Philadelphia, and
nice.
And he was with the Calgary Roughnecks coaching staff. They were there the 2 nights before to play Philadelphia, and that's why they were there. And they stuck around for that game. He was just talking about how intense it was. Your take on 2 moments that we had, they're just lighthearted ones. Like, well, not lighthearted, but just, I guess kind of other points to this game that we wanted to ask you about. First being A.J. Brown.
Sure.
Mass touched on it briefly. Him reading the book on the sidelines. And then the other one is Saquon Barkley at the end of the game. He breaks one. He could have ran all the way to the house, or at least ran to the 10-yard line and slid down. But he did right away. Just your thoughts on those two.
Well, the A.J. Brown thing's amazing to me, guys, because on the Amazon list, that book was like $525,000, and by the end of yesterday, it was number 1 in book sales. Like, that author owes A.J. Brown. Imagine that. Like, you talk about your life changing overnight. That's just absolutely amazing. Look, I think Saquon, when he sat the last game of the regular season, didn't get the record. I think he just let everybody know what a team guy he is and how badly he wants to win. Like, this thing is legit right now. Philadelphia's got a real shot to make something happen. And I think Saquon, after all that losing in New York, wants to win more than anything else.
All right. Saturday's games. First up will be the Texans because they can never not play a Saturday afternoon game against the Kansas City Chiefs. Is there any hope there? It's in Kansas City, although the Texans defense came to play last week. The San Diego Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs, outside of being in the same league together, really the similarities stop there. Can't take them for granted.
Mahomes, though. But Mahomes hasn't thrown in a while.
Doesn't matter. Oh, did we lose Arash? No, we lost Arash. We'll effort to get him back. Yeah, game number 1 on Saturday. The Texans going into Kansas City to play the Chiefs. And I think that no matter what, I mean, unless it's a minor miracle, and the Chiefs self-destruct. The Chiefs self-destruct
no,
with turnovers.
I agree. I agree with Matt.
Yeah.
I think it has to be something like that. A lot of people are talking about the fact that Mahomes hasn't thrown a ball since Christmas, but I mean, I think we're just looking for storylines to try to make this a little closer. Make it more of a, I don't know, suspenseful than I think it's going to be. So I don't. If anything, maybe that just makes Mahomes a little more spry.
We got Arash back. All right, so
Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah,
just want to kind of follow up on Mahomes. He hasn't played a snap since Christmas Day. Like we're talking about somebody who's coming into this game, fresh. And one of the things with KC, and I don't know where you guys kind of stand on this, they just feel like they've been playing on borrowed time for a lot of this season. And we're talking about a team that, starts the year 15-1, which is weird to say. But, they lack that dominance, and yet they're the 1 seed. They haven't had that explosiveness yet. Who's going to count out Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, and Patrick Mahomes in January? I just find them to be a real weird, intriguing, tough group to kind of figure out going into this year's postseason. Because, you get a three-peat. That's rarefied air in sports, any pro sport.
Kept it exciting
with the Patriots too.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the other thing too is when the Patriots were winning some of those Super Bowls, remember when they beat the Rams 13-3? I think it was us as fans getting greedy, we want a blowout. It's Tom Brady winning Super Bowl. We want where they just care about the winning. And that's where I think now too with Kansas City is, like you said, Arash, it's not spectacular. They just find a way to make one more play when they need it most, just to keep it going. And the other thing, too, is I would never count out an Andy Reid dialing up a play that no one's ever seen before at the right time, and it just coming through to, I think, so are we all in agreement that Chiefs over Texans isn't a ridiculous thought? Because the other game is probably the more intriguing one. You've got Jaden Daniels and the feel-good story of the NFL going up against a team that everybody wants to win. Everybody likes Dan Campbell and Jared Goff. But after what Jaden Daniels did against the Bucs, the kid's got some mojo going. I don't know if it's that lightning in a bottle, but there's something there.
Yeah, and it's beyond just the Bucs. It's been much of this season. I remember week, 6, 7, 8, watching this kid, and I'm like, we're sure he was in college last year. Is that the same, is that the same quarterback who was at LSU? You talk about a player who's kind of wise beyond his years, ability beyond his years. That's Jaden Daniels. And literally the definition of unflappable. What phase is that guy? I will say this. I don't think I was on with you guys last week. It was Barney and Sharkey, but I went to the last game of the season, Detroit, Minnesota, and I think this is where it's going to get interesting for a rookie quarterback. Because Ford Field, and I've been to a lot of stadiums, guys, a lot of arenas, that was the loudest building I've ever been in by far, in any sport, in any city, in any country, for any event. So how will that affect Washington on a silent count, trying to communicate, trying to change plays with a rookie quarterback, trying to, fool him into deceiving him with what their defensive looks are going to be? I think that's going to be a huge kind of subplot to this football game.
I was going to ask you one more thing about that, Arash, too. It didn't sneak up on us, but Detroit, Ford Field, as you mentioned, just supposed to be an amazing place to watch a game now. That's now come up as one of the stadiums that you got to go to. It's now on your NFL bucket list. I've heard from a number of people, including yourself a few times, and I was I think it was Barney and myself that were on when you were talking about it as well. Ford Field, yeah, it's there now. It's a bucket list NFL stadium, and that crowd, that home field advantage, as you said, is a real deal, is a real thing.
And it's amazing what winning can do. Like, this is like this era of the Lions. Like, the Lions have been horrible forever, right? They went winless in 2008, for crying out loud. You know, the lasting image of the Lions is probably Dan Orlovsky running out of the back of the end zone, which is unfair to Dan, but that's kind of who and what they were. Paper bags on fans' heads, wasting away Hall of Fame careers like Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders. That's what the Detroit Lions have been, and now they're hitting on draft picks. Downtown Detroit's revitalized. A blue-collar coach with a blue-collar team in a blue-collar town that's absolutely balling. And the Tigers have been to a couple of World Series. You know, in the last 20 years, the Pistons have won a championship in the 2000s. The Red Wings had their run in the 90s and, of course, got there, I don't know, whenever it was, 15 years ago. Finally, it's the Lions' time, and Michigan is just all in on them.
Legacy game, the late game on Sunday between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Both could be the NFL MVP this year, but none of this stuff matters unless they start winning Super Bowls. Patrick Mahomes has his, so he's cemented his. They've had great seasons, but to me, I think, and a lot of people, this could be the game of the weekend. This could maybe be the game of the playoffs, Ravens, Bills. I know it's early, we're days out. Is it not a huge point spread there? Where are you, coming early, where are you in on this? Are you Team Lamar or are you Team Allen?
I know we live in a hot take world, guys. I'm honestly Team both. Like, both are amazing. Like, remove Josh Allen from Buffalo and they win what? 3 games?
5 games.
Maybe 4?
Maybe, yeah.
And instead they're hosting the divisional playoff after an absolute blowout postseason win. And then you have Lamar, twice an MVP, who this year threw for 41 touchdowns and only 4 picks, who threw for over 4,000 yards, rushed for over 900 yards, who I'm still confused how the Ravens lost to KC last year in the AFC Championship game. Like game of the playoffs, absolutely. Although I would love to see KC Buffalo or KC Baltimore the following week for his trip to the Super Bowl too. Yeah, if you're Josh Allen and you lose this, you have to start to wonder when. And if you're Lamar and the Ravens and you just brought in Derrick Henry and your defense has only given up 43 points in the last 4 regular season games, and you don't win and you took a step back after being the 1 seed last year, then really organizationally you wonder what it's going to take.
So you love both. We'll just leave it at that because it is early. All right, let's change gears. The Dallas Cowboys and Mike McCarthy decide that, we're going to break up. It's mutual. And now there's talk because in Jerry world, it's crazy. Jerry has all the control. But the Deion Sanders thing keeps coming out. Is he one of the few that may be able to tell Jerry, no, I want to do it my way? Take a step back, and will he listen?
No.
I know.
No. I mean, what Jerry say at the end of the season? He said, "I bought this team to be the GM." I'm paraphrasing, but it's very close to the exact quote. Look, it's very obvious Jerry Jones has no idea what he's doing in football operations, right? Like that's now become abundantly clear. Even just with this McCarthy thing, if they pulled the trigger on McCarthy last week, it meant they could have interviewed Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson and some of the other coaching candidates, but now they can't because the window's closed coming off the bye week. He just doesn't have a fundamental, basic operating understanding of how the actual day-to-day of the league works, and yet he's the one who's making, has final say on personnel decisions. I thought it was telling, guys, and I don't know if you guys heard this or saw this. Last night, Troy Aikman went on the ESPN pregame show and just, Troy Aikman, Cowboy legend, Hall of Famer, Dallas icon, said the Cowboy job is not a coveted one. I mean, when Uncle Troy comes out and says that, doesn't that just give you incredible pause to be like, whoa, what is actually happening there? What has happened to that job, to that franchise? And all the roads point back to Jarrell Wayne Jones.
I believe when Aikman said it, and I think we're trying to find the audio, Troy was very polite and very careful in how he basically said that the Dallas Cowboy Gong Show dictatorship is nothing, no matter who it is, wants to be part of. Because I think the only person, I think I said this to Durant yesterday, the only person I think that would have had a fighting shot to get Jerry to listen, because he'd won a Super Bowl in his pedigree, would be Sean Payton. But that ship sailed and he's with Denver. And look what he did with Denver with dead cap space and not a great roster. But,
Jerry doesn't want
coach.
to be told. Yeah, but Jerry doesn't want that. Right? If that was the case, way back when, he wouldn't have run Jimmy Johnson out of town. He wouldn't be hiring people like Chan Gailey and Dave Campo.
Guys.
I don't know. In a lot of ways, guys, the Dallas Cowboys are football's version of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Toronto Maple Leafs are hockey's version of the Dallas Cowboys.
Hey, Arash, before we let you go,
will.
Yeah. Before we let you go, Arash, you wanted to, when you and I were talking a bit earlier today, going back and forth, you wanted to also switch things up and talk a little bit about the CFL, and we were talking about the Riders and the moves that they have made. Maybe just an update on the Toronto Argonauts and Chad Kelly out there. You wanted to touch on that as well.
Yeah, and I heard you guys at the top of the segment talking about Geno Lewis. The Riders on their roster right now have a lot of twos, well, a couple of twos and a bunch of threes and fours. Geno Lewis would be a one. Geno Lewis would become a home run hitter. Geno Lewis is exactly what this offense needs. That's the kind of player, when he becomes available, you go get and you write the check, and then you figure out the rest after. If it wasn't for Polk and if it wasn't for Coxie, the Argos don't win the Grey Cup. So that's my take on Geno Lewis. Now, the guy who was supposed to be throwing the football in the Grey Cup for Toronto, of course, broken tibula, fibula. Pinball Clemens had an availability at some league or some football event in North Carolina, and he said Chad has had his surgery, that it's progressing. They won't really have an update, a further update, until at least next month. They're hopeful for training camp, but they just don't know. So, to me, there's just a big question mark. And again, it's January, so there's lots of time before camp. But there's still a big question mark in Toronto in terms of what the quarterback room may look like and what they may have to go do, which is why I think, as we sit here right now, no major quarterbacking decisions have been made with the Argos. What's going to happen with Nick Arbuckle, et cetera, because they're just still kind of waiting on Chad's health.
I think with Ryan Dinwiddie and how good of a coach he is, and I think a lot of us, I always thought he was a really good coach, and it's not like they hadn't won before this past year, but you just see what he was able to do through turmoil and bring that team together, that even if it is a Nick Arbuckle, I'm like, well, Dinwiddie will get the most out of Nick Arbuckle. He'll squeeze every drop out of that.
I get that for like a game or a month. I think from May to November, it's an altogether different animal than it is for just a kind of short little burst or a specific matchup in a specific week. Lightning in a bottle can be very different than, the whole long grind of the season. That's the only thing that kind of gives me a little bit of pause there.
There's been a lot of talk about the CFL schedule not being out, and we don't need to go 10 minutes into that. Just it is what it is. And I was texting with somebody last week, and I said, hey, if the league never talked about and everybody involved about this thing growing and bringing in new fans and all of this, then who cares? Put it out a week before the season starts. It doesn't matter. If you don't need to grow anymore, like if you're the NFL, you're a monster, you can do whatever. People are going to show up and watch. But in the position there, it's like, no, we need to grow, we need to do this. Then I'm like, this, once again, as we're now into the second week of January, and it's funny thing, Rash, you mentioned we're all doing stuff. Entertainment dollars, there's only so many, and time that we're going to allot. And with every day or week that goes by, people are making choices about their upcoming calendar. And that's what, besides missing out on the Christmas season, which was huge, but it's one of those things where people will find a way to fill the time or the void going forward. So do you have any insight of when this may finally drop? Will it be this week, next week, February 1st? Like, what are we talking here?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. And like, I hear so much rhetoric and nonsense about, trying to like carry the water for the league, that they're not having a touchdown Pacific or an Atlantic game this year because the Argos are doing better at the turnstiles. Well, first of all, last year was BC versus Ottawa, not Toronto. Secondly, the Argos hosted a playoff game against the Red Blacks in November on their way to winning a championship, 2 years removed from winning a championship, and the entire upper deck on the east side was closed. And, look at just what happened this week. Okay, like last night, Minnesota played Los Angeles in Arizona. Tickets went on sale 48 to 72 hours before kickoff. And they had a pre-sale window for LA fans for an hour or two, and then for Arizona fans for an hour or two, and then general public. And within like half a day, they sold 52,000 tickets. Now, here you have a home team in a playoff game in the country's biggest market, and the upper deck is closed. Here, like, Grey Cup has become a challenge to sell out. This year's in Vancouver didn't sell out. You knew it was going to be there for 2 years. What are you doing? Meanwhile, we all know the challenges. We all know the issues. And what just is over and over again just keeps getting reminded to us is that the people in charge just don't know what they're doing. And it continues to make things worse.
We'll let that one hang in the air for a sec. And with that, we'll say, Arash, you have a great day. Are the Leafs playing tonight? Just let me check here. Just want to see if I know what you're going to be doing.
The Raptors actually won a game last night. Hell did freeze over.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So Dallas at Toronto. So we'll let you go get ready for you're probably tailgating out front of the ACC here in a little bit. So we'll let you get your jersey on. And,
boys. We'll talk to you soon.
It's Arash Madani, Coast to Coast for Brian Golly from your Smart Investing Solutions. I love it. Rash is never afraid to give us an ounce of honesty, especially when it comes to the Canadian Football League. All right, time for a break. And speaking of the CFL, those meetings that were going on in North Carolina, the coaches' meetings, Dave Thomas caught up with Ed Hervey, the new general manager of the Edmonton Elks. We'll get his thoughts on what he thinks about his team going into the 2025 season. We'll do that next. It's the all-new Sports Cage streaming at sportscage.com and on the radio at 620 CKRM.